Maria was exhausted. Not the kind of exhaustion that sleep could fix, but the kind that settled deep into her bones, weighing her down like a heavy coat. Every night she drove through the city, picking up strangers, listening to their stories, their drunken ramblings, their secrets whispered in the dark. But no one ever asked about her. No one knew that behind the wheel sat a mother of 3, a woman fighting to keep food on the table, to pay the bills before the notices turned red. Tonight was no different, except for the storm. The rain came down in furious sheets, hammering against her taxi's roof, drowning out the hum of the engine. The wipers scraped back and forth, barely keeping up. The streets were empty, swallowed by the night, save for the occasional flicker of neon lights reflecting off the wet pavement. Maria tightened her grip on the wheel. Just a few more hours, a few more fares. Then she could go home, slip into bed beside her daughters, and pretend for a moment that life wasn't a constant battle. She didn't know it yet, but this night wouldn't end like the others. It would change everything. The night was never kind to Maria, but at least it was predictable. The streets held their usual ghosts, lonely souls looking for a ride, lost men escaping their mistakes, lovers whispering empty promises in the back seat. She had seen it all. She had learned not to ask questions. But tonight, something felt different. Her phone buzzed against the dashboard, the screen flashing with an unfamiliar number. A message popped up. "Pick me up! Urgent! No questions!" Maria frowned. No name, no location tag, just coordinates leading to an empty bus stop on the far side of the city, a place where no one should be waiting at this hour. She hesitated. Every instinct told her to ignore it, to finish her shift and go home to her daughters. But rent was due in 3 days, and she couldn't afford to be picky. With a sigh, she flicked on her turn signal and drove into the rain. The bus stop was barely visible through the downpour, its streetlight flickering weakly. Maria slowed, scanning the sidewalk. Then she saw him, a tall man standing perfectly still in the rain. His trench coat was soaked, water dripping from the brim of his hat. He didn't move until her taxi came to a full stop. Then, without a word, he opened the door and slid into the back seat. The air inside the cab instantly felt colder. Maria glanced at him through the rearview mirror. His face was mostly hidden in shadows, but she could see his hands, trembling, gripping something tightly. A small silver object glinted for a moment before he shoved it into his coat pocket. She swallowed. "Where to?" His voice was low, almost a whisper. "Just drive. I'll tell you when to stop." Maria's stomach twisted. Something about this man set off alarms in her head, but she had already accepted the fare. She put the car in gear and pulled onto the road. For a while, neither of them spoke. The only sounds were the rain against the windshield and the rhythmic swish of the wipers. Then Maria noticed the headlights. A black SUV trailing too close behind them. Too steady. Too precise. Her fingers tensed on the wheel. The man in the back seat shifted slightly, as if sensing the same thing. He turned his head, just enough to catch a glimpse of the vehicle in the side mirror. His breath quickened. "They found me," he muttered under his breath. Maria's chest tightened. "Who's they?" she asked, her voice low. He exhaled sharply. "The kind of people who don't leave loose ends." The SUV suddenly accelerated. A second later, bam! It slammed into the back of the taxi. Maria's hands clenched the wheel as the car lurched forward. "Hold on!" she yelled. She yanked the wheel to the right, cutting sharply down a narrow alley, water splashing against the curbs. The SUV hesitated for a second before following, its tires screeching on the slick pavement. Maria's mind raced. She had spent years learning this city, memorizing its veins, its dead ends, and its escape routes. If they wanted a chase, she would give them one. She took a sharp left, then another, weaving through the maze of back streets, until suddenly, nothing. The SUV was gone. She pulled onto an empty road, her heart hammering against her ribs. In the mirror, the man finally exhaled. "That was close," he murmured. Maria turned in her seat. "You want to tell me what the hell is going on?" The man hesitated. Then, slowly, he pulled something from his pocket, a silver locket. He flipped it open and turned it toward her. Inside was a picture of a little girl, no older than Ava. "They took her," he said, his voice breaking. "They took my daughter." Maria felt something deep in her gut twist. She didn't know this man. She didn't know his story. But she knew that fear, the fear of losing a child, the kind that consumed you whole. She exhaled. "Where is she?" The man blinked. "You'll help me?" Maria put the car in gear. "If it were my daughter, I'd burn the whole damn city down." They reached the warehouse on the outskirts of town. A crumbling building bathed in darkness. A single light flickered above the entrance. Maria could see a small figure inside, tied to a chair, her stomach twisted. A child. His child. A man in a suit stood over her, smirking. "You shouldn't have come back," he said coldly. The father didn't hesitate. He lunged. A shot rang out, but it missed. Maria moved without thinking, swinging the tire iron she had grabbed from the trunk. The suited man crumpled to the ground, unconscious. And then there was silence. The little girl sobbed as her father untied her, crushing her in his arms. "I got you, baby," he whispered. "I got you." Maria drove them to a safe motel. The man turned to her, eyes filled with something unspoken. He reached into his pocket and handed her an envelope. "For your daughters," he said. "Thank you." Maria didn't open it until she got home. Inside was enough money to change everything. As she stepped into her apartment, the storm had passed. The first light of morning seeped through the windows. Sophia, Elena, and Ava were still asleep, their soft breaths filling the quiet room. Maria sat down, holding the music box Ava had given her before she left that night. She pressed the button. A soft lullaby played. Maria exhaled, closing her eyes. Tonight, she had left as just a driver. She had come back as something else. A protector, a survivor, a mother who would always fight for what mattered most.